From my perspective, what we're living in are surreal times, and in a bad way. The suffering is enormous, and we can go on about statistics. It's not just the high level of unemployment; it's the it's the number of people who've been without jobs for really long periods of time. It's been officially there's 4 million. People who've been out of work for more than a year now. And because some people have dropped out, the real number is bigger than that. And that has not happened in this country since the 1930s. We used to say, not very long ago, that, well, lots of people were unemployed at any given time in America, but they were an ever-shifting group, unlike those Europeans. And now, actually, we have long-term unemployment every bit as bad as any European country, except that we don't have the social safety net that they do. So here, being out of work means being without health insurance, often means just not being able to put food on the table. So it's, just to say also, gosh, I lead a pretty sheltered life and live here, which is a pretty sheltered community as these things go, and yet even I know dozens of people who are in desperate straits. Men my age who've been laid off and have really no hope of ever working again. Recent graduates of college who can't find a job and wonder if their lives will ever get started. You go down the list. It's an incredible amount of suffering. What makes it so surreal is that it's completely, it's not a mystery why this is happening, and it's not at all a mystery about how to solve it. Back in the 1930s, you could have said, well, people had no idea. They didn't have any notion how such things were possible. They had no idea what would work. But that was a long time ago. We've had a lot of experience, a lot of accumulated knowledge. This is not a mystery. What we've had is a collapse in demand. We had a housing bubble. We had runaway banks. We had a buildup of consumer debt. At a certain point, the music stopped. And we had actually what some of us call the Wile E. Coyote moment. If you're not familiar with the classics and the cartoons and Roadrunner, it's always the point when he runs about 5 steps past the edge of the cliff, and it's only when he looks down. So we've had our Wile E. Coyote moment, and so there's just not enough spending, because my spending is your income and vice versa. And if there is just not enough spending in the economy, you end up with mass unemployment, which is what we have. Because we understand what's going on, the solutions are not fundamentally complicated. You basically, a lot of what's dragging down the economy is the burden of consumer debt, and we should certainly have a major program of mortgage principal reductions, of debt forgiveness. And in the meantime, while we're working that out, the answer is for the government to spend. This is, even if you didn't think that there were huge employment benefits from public spending, how could there be a better time to be doing public works projects? We have millions of unemployed construction workers. The federal government can borrow long-term at an interest rate of 2%. Actually, if it sells inflation-adjusted bonds, it can borrow at an interest rate of 0. Lending is actually free to the federal government. Why not? Why shouldn't we be, for example, building an extra rail tunnel under the Hudson River? That's something dear to my heart. So here we are. We have enormous human suffering coming out of a well-understood problem with well-understood solutions. There's no mystery here. What we're actually getting, however, is, first of all, an incredible proliferation of excuses for not acting. There's so many people out there who, with great wisdom, explain to you why we can't put people to work. They don't have the right skills. There are technological obstacles, as if all of those people weren't working just a few years ago, as if we've had some retrogression in technology. And I've actually done some historical research, and you can go back to the 1930s. You'll find that people were saying the same things, that people in the late 1930s were saying, well, this technology, everything's changed. There's no way that we can ever return to full employment in this modern world. Then along came the build-up to World War II, even before the war, and all of a sudden we had full employment. All it took was a serious program of public spending, which, as usual, could only happen for destruction rather than construction, and we had full employment. I have actually joked on TV that if we discovered a threat from space aliens that required us to beef up our infrastructure to prepare for the alien invasion, and then discovered a few years later, actually, there aren't any space aliens. In the meantime, we would have solved it. It would all be over. It would be gone in 18 months. There's also, and this is where it gets truly disturbing, there's been a hijacking of the economic crisis on behalf of an agenda that has nothing to do, in fact, is exactly contrary to the problems we have. So for much of the past 2 years, all of the discussion in Washington has been about deficits. Jobs virtually disappeared. And what are we supposed to do about deficits? Not, like raise taxes on high-income people or corporations. We're supposed to slash Medicaid and raise the Medicare eligibility age. And so basically an agenda which was intended to basically make America more unequal and make our society, which is uniquely brutal and harsh among advanced countries, even more brutal and harsh, has taken over a lot of the discussion, all under the guise of this is what we need to do. I sometimes talk about very serious people, capital V, capital S, capital P. The very serious people are telling us that we have to do this, that austerity is where we need to go, which is kind of, again, it's kind of surreal because these are the same people who have been wrong about everything these past 10 years. So what's, how can we change this? I think I suffer from an occupational hazard because writing, in the world's greatest newspaper twice a week, and tend to always think in terms of well, what could be done, legislatively, what's the possibility, and the truth is, legislatively, nothing can be done. Certainly until next year's election. If the president proposed that we honor motherhood, the GOP would vote against it. But you always have to think beyond what seems immediately possible. And what's needed most of all, I think, at this point, is that we need to change the conversation. This is where the Occupy Wall Street has been so amazing. I think it was one of those weird things where the state of our discussion was so surreal, and the emperor had no clothes, and yet nobody was saying it. I mean, I thought I was saying it, but obviously it wasn't getting through. And then a fairly ragtag group of ordinary people start camping out in a few parks in major cities, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like the country woke up. What on earth have we been talking about these past 2 years? Why aren't we talking about the jobs crisis? Why aren't we talking about why some people are doing so well and whether perhaps we should do something about inequality instead of slashing the social, enlarging the holes in the social safety net? So this is, I think it's a hopeful moment. It's also a very nervous moment because there's a real possibility that we'll have a government a year from now that is even worse than what we have right now. But the thing always to remember is this doesn't have to be happening. And all it takes is for enough people to understand that it doesn't have to be happening, and we can become a much better country very quickly. American workers are actually very, very productive. It's not the case that we have to pay Chinese-level wages to be able to compete in the world marketplace. And it's worth bearing in mind that German labor, for example, is actually substantially more expensive than U.S. labor. We're actually kind of a low-wage country among the high technology, high productivity countries. So that mostly the problem of full employment is not because our wages are too high. There's a specific issue involving China, which is deliberately keeping its currency too weak, which is helping to undercut American labor. But the notion that we either have to close ourselves off to the world or have to cut our wages to third world levels to compete is just wrong. And you can tell that by looking at all the other advanced countries that have done very well while maintaining quite high wages and maintaining much more generous social safety nets than we have. It's not, walk around Stockholm, which is a country that is even more open to international trade than we are. Walk around Germany, which has its problems, and I hope we don't get into a Euro discussion here. But anyway, but the point is that that's in a way a fallacy that serves the wrong side, if you like, because it's the implication that in this globalized world we can't afford to treat our workers decently, and that's all wrong.